This is Game On, discussing the biggest games and all the latest sports news with Johnny Montalbano and Hank Indictor on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
Showtime, folks. It's episode 27 of Game On here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. I'm Johnny Montalbano. That's Hank Indictor. Hank, welcome. How are you?
Doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm better for two reasons. Number one, my voice is back, so I'm able to do the show again. That's why we were not on last week. And number two, got through Hurricane Ian, which we all know hit Florida really hard and actually came up this way. And on Friday, when we did our Football Friday pick segment, we were actually recording that right in the middle of Ian hitting the Myrtle Beach area. And it was just crazy because I live 5 to 10 minutes away from Garden City Beach. And that was an area that the coast got hit really, really hard. They just actually got back to normal recently, and if you've been watching the news, you actually could see Myrtle Beach and certain parts of South Carolina along the East Coast there got hit really hard from what was a Category 1 hurricane and Ian at the time. Now, of course, Florida was much, much worse. I was watching that footage last Wednesday with no voice, and my jaw was just dropped in disbelief over that was because, I watch a lot of hurricane coverage over the years, and even then, I never saw it. What I saw in all the years that I've been watching it. So our thoughts and prayers are with everybody still affected by it down in Florida. And even in South Carolina, it was kind of rough here too. But fortunately, I got through it okay. No issues whatsoever. And my voice is back because allergies have gone away for now. So we'll take it and, have a good show. But it's good to be back on and doing this, Hank. And we come here as we start in October. And we've got a lot to get to. And, of course, folks, we want to hear from you as well. So plenty of ways for you to get aboard. Make sure to follow us across our social media channels on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at GameOnETB on Facebook and Twitter, and on Instagram at GameOn_ETB, and our personal handles on the bottom of your screen. Hank, it's October, so we're going to start getting everything into the course of the show in the next couple of weeks. But this week we've got a lot of baseball as the final series of the year for everybody is happening right now, and then the wild card round of the postseason happens this weekend. And then when we're back here next week, we will have the division series to look forward to. We've, of course, got a lot of NFL with what happened in week 4 and previewing the Thursday night game between the Colts and the Broncos. So certainly a lot to get to in the course of the show. But let's lead things off here, Hank, with the baseball. And the big story from a postseason perspective this week was the NL East. And the Mets and the Braves, as I was saying a couple of weeks ago, this division was going to come down to the last week of the year, and it certainly has done that. And the Braves come through in a big way over the weekend and sweep the Mets. And as a result of doing that, they've won the season series against them, and then also is the NL East division tiebreaker. And there's definitely a lot to talk about with this series because really all the talk, or a lot of the talk, I should say, from this series was, did the Mets collapse? Now, of course, when you're leading the NL East for about 95% of the season, people are going to think you're collapsing already. But folks, let's just get this out right away. This is not a collapse by the New York Mets with what happened this weekend. What this is what I've been saying all season long. The Atlanta Braves from top to bottom are the better team. And I can't say it's a collapse with the Mets when they've won 98 games. When you look at them, the Braves are just better. And yes, the Mets probably picked the worst time to have both a bad start from DeGrom and Scherzer consecutively. And then, of course, Bassett, who probably had the worst of it all by not getting out of the third inning there on Sunday. But, Hank, I can't sit here as we get set for the postseason and say that the Mets collapsed when the Braves are better at almost every position than the Mets, with maybe the exception of Jeff McNeil, whatever position he's playing at. But to me, the Braves are just the better team all around. And now it looks like they're going to win this NL East, barring something crazy happening these last couple of days. But what do you think about this whole NL East race now and the talks of a possible collapse here?
I think the way I look at it, there are two things. Number one, if we look at the real big picture with the Mets, and this was a stat I saw dating back to when the Mets were about 10 games ahead of the Braves for first place. The Mets, during a good portion of the season and up until now, went 63-44. So in that sense, I pretty much agree. It's not really that much of a collapse in the grand scheme of things. I mean, let me give you a little fun fact. The Mets have this is actually the most wins the Mets have had in a single season during both of our lifetimes, actually. In fact, the last time they had even won 100 games was, I believe, the 1988 season where they had that bad loss to the Dodgers. But since then, they didn't do anything again until 99, and that was when they won 97 games, and then same thing for 06. So this is any other year, we'd be looking at this Mets team, and we'd be celebrating this like probably one of the best seasons of their lifetime. But the only reason we're having this conversation, of course, is because of the Atlanta Braves, who simply went on and he had an even better stretch. And, you look at the talent they have, like you look at their lineup and their pitching staff, which may not necessarily on paper be better than the Mets. I think overall lineup wise and like maybe pitching wise, with the possible exception of the bullpen, you would have to give the Braves the edge as the better team. So in the grand scheme of things, it's not that surprising. However, with that being said, I also have to, be fair and look at the other side of the argument, which isn't necessarily invalid, but looking at the whole month of September as a whole, that's where you can argue that the Mets choked. It wasn't necessarily a collapse, but it was a choke because you had a series against the Chicago Cubs at home, lost all 4 of those games. Any 1 or 2 of those games that they've won in that series, it goes the other way around. Again, we're probably having a different conversation on this day. And maybe that Brave series doesn't mean as much. And then you look at some of the other games they lost. They lost a few to the Pirates. They lost a game in Oakland. And in that game against Oakland, that was where Jacob deGrom pitched and gave up 4 runs after being up 3-0 in the first inning. So, and I haven't even gotten to the Atlanta series, which in all 3 games, they were pretty close. And you could also make the argument that in that series, the Mets choked. Now, of course, again, part of this has to do with the loss of Starling Marte. But as I've said on this show multiple times, and as I have said on Hitting for the Cycle multiple times, this problem could have been avoided if they had just gone out and signed a big batter or traded for a bigger bat or 2 in the deadline. I mean, look, I get that they got the Tyler Naquins, the Daniel Vogelbacks, and the Darren Ruffs, but neither of those names really brought much substance into that lineup, so to speak. And even with the bullpen acquisitions, they were kind of ass. So the Mets really have no one, in that sense, have no one to blame but themselves. But with that being said, I wouldn't entirely call it a collapse just because, again, big picture, this is still one of the better seasons that they've had in a while. And remember, I interviewed with a Mets fan after one of the Subway series, and he'd been watching the Mets since like the mid to late 90s, and he said that this was probably like the most talented Mets team that he's ever seen. So I can't really put the word collapse with them. I just think you have to give the Braves credit where credit is due, but you also have to acknowledge that there were certain series that the Mets didn't win. So the answer could technically be both.
It can be, yeah. And when you play a long season like baseball, 162 games, you know what? You're going to have series like you had against the Pirates, like the Cubs throughout the season. Now, maybe, of course, it happening in September is where it sticks out a little bit more. But you brought up Starling Marte, and I think that has to really be talked about here because him not being in that lineup, what it does is, it really forces your hand into playing like the Tyler Naquins and the Vogelbachs and the Ruffs of the world a little bit more. And even the Marcanas, who, Marcana's been a good player, but is he a starting player every day on a team? I don't think so. I think he's more of like a 4th outfielder kind of guy. but he's being forced into playing every day because of the injury to Marte. Now, the last we heard about Marte on Tuesday was that he's making a little bit of progress, and they're saying that he actually could be back for the wild card round. It's not that out of that realm of a possibility, but I don't know considering what you've heard beforehand regarding Marte. But yeah, see, the thing that I would say, Hank, is the fact that the starting pitch in that series, that all three of them, DeGrom, Scherzer, and Bassett all struggled, would be a little bit alarming, because you would at least think you would get a quality start out of one of those three. And the Bassett start on Sunday was just really bad, because even when the Mets do jump out to a 3-1 lead on Sunday and Bassett goes right back out and can't even get out of the third inning, that's a concern. And you know what? Bassett's going to be that kind of swing guy in the rotation now as you either enter the wild card or the divisional series rounds, because after DeGrom and Scherzer, it's kind of I don't want to say drop off, but you start heading into the Bassett's, the Taiwan Walkers of the world. Carlos Carrasco, I don't even know is going to be able to make a start in the playoffs with the way he's been pitching lately. So that would be a thing too. But you look at it, Hank, you and I have spoken before, when we did our baseball preview show. I don't think any of us would have in our wildest dreams thought that the Mets would have been a 90-plus win team. Now, Buck Showalter being there, I think was definitely helped. And the fact that you've had Pete Alonso have another great year, Francisco Lindor in his second year in New York, seems like he's really turned it around and been the Lindor they thought they were getting. But McNeil's bounced back, but you really look at it afterwards. I mean, they've got nothing offensively wise out of catcher. Third base, they've gotten, a decent amount from Escobar. He's had a nice little stretch here, but your outfield, when you don't have Marte there, is Canna, who's a fourth outfielder, really. Nimmo, who's a pretty good leadoff hitter. And really Marte, but he hasn't been there lately. So I think when you look at it, I think 98 wins, you have to be big picture right now. You have to be excited as a Met fan. Now, let's talk about this going forward here, because you don't want to look ahead to the off season, but the reality is you have a possibility of DeGrom opting out. Bassett's a free agent. That's already 2/5 of your rotation right there that could be gone, and two integral parts. So that's why maybe they think this window might be really this year. This might be the best team that they've had. But yeah, it's tricky, because they could go out these next couple of games and win them, and they could go in the wild card series and pitch really well and win against, right now, it looks like maybe the Padres, unless, of course, a miracle happens. But it's certainly still possible. I don't think the Mets are still that bad that they could flounder like this. But, it's baseball. We don't know. It's you don't really know what to expect going into this series. But I still think, though, at the end of the day, when you look at this whole year, I think it just boils down to the fact that the Braves are a better team. Matt Olson, great. Dansby Swanson, great. Austin Riley, great. Acuna coming back, great. Look at the rookies that they have. Michael Harris, we've spoken about him getting that extension. Grissom, they've got guys.
And Strider, too.
Spencer Strider, who I know he's hurt right now, but he's been a nice boost to that rotation. Charlie Moore's a good pitcher. Kyle Wright. The team's great, and then also getting Raisel Iglesias at the deadline, which was not really talked about a lot.
Oh, that was a huge acquisition.
Yeah, and he was there. And apparently,
by the way, what did I say about Alex Anthopoulos during that trade deadline stream?
You did say, yeah.
Look what he did last year. He got a lot of good late season acquisitions, all of whom contributed to their stretch drive. And Raisel Iglesias is just another example of those guys. So I don't think we really talk about how good of a job that Alex Anthopoulos has done with the Atlanta Braves. And look, would you honestly, looking at that team, really, with the possible exception of the bullpen, would you be surprised if they somehow found a way to run it back? I know I wouldn't.
No, and I do want to bring that up, because I know the Dodgers have won 110 games. I'm not in love with the Dodgers pitching staff, though. The Braves, to me, have a better pitching staff. I think the Dodgers lineup's better, but I think the Braves pitching is better. And the Braves have a good enough lineup that they could definitely compete with them again. There's no doubt in my mind. That's why I said if the Mets somehow could get to it probably looks to be more like a DS now, but even they got to an NLCS against the Dodgers, I think they could actually match up against them. Maybe not in the lineup, but with the pitching staff. And, a great pitching staff can shut down an offense.
Well, I mean, it's not like the Dodgers pitching staff is anything to sneeze at, but I do think that if they do not make it back to the World Series, the one guy who they're going to really miss is Walker Buehler, because as I've talked about before, he loves pitching in the bright lights. He's a guy that can give you length, and to not have that, I think that's a bigger loss than people realize. I mean, I'm not saying that Tyler Anderson and Clayton Kershaw and Urias don't have anything left in the tank, but like, I don't, comparing them to the Braves starting rotation, I don't know. That's a bit of a tough one, because remember, this isn't prime Kershaw we're really talking about here.
And that's the thing too. Kershaw could give you 5 or 6 strong innings, but then you got to try and piecemeal the back of that bullpen, and that for the Dodgers to me is scary. I'm more confident with the Braves bullpen with either Jansen or Iglesias than I would be.
And even Kenley's the guy you kind of worry about from time to time. But yeah, I do agree.
Yeah, and Kershaw may give you 5 strong innings, but it's going to be that length, and you still got to get 4 innings. And that would be the other thing I would say about Tony Gonsolin, who hopefully will be back. He was putting up a Cy Young caliber year before he got hurt. What is he? If he comes back, is he going to be able to give you length? That's length's a big deal here, and for every team in baseball, the middle relief is a weakness. Unless you're going to put one of your starters in and do like a Ramiro Mendoza kind of thing, but not many pitchers are like that can either spot start or long relieve or get you 1 or 2 outs. Those kind of pitchers don't really exist anymore. But yeah, that's why it's so fascinating now with what happened here with the Braves sweeping the Mets and winning at least, because now all of a sudden the Mets now have to go into in all likelihood have to go into a wild card spot here and face what looks like possibly the Padres in the first round starting on the 7th. And you never know. The Padres may be finding their form here. Juan Soto, I know, has been finally turning it around a little bit, but it's not like the Padres are going to be an easy team to face too in that round. Even if they have to come cross country. You know what? You never. One thing about baseball, you don't know. It's, now with the expanded playoffs and stuff, I mean, we're looking at the Braves and the Dodgers probably being the 2 favorites, but I like the Mets too. If they get in and line up right and everything works out, I think they can be up there too. And you know what? I have to say this: the Cardinals can't be ruled out either. They always, and I think I had said that with you on Hitting for the Cycle a little while ago. The one team I would also, that I think is being undervalued and underrated and a surprise team are the Cardinals, because they always seem to find a way to do more with less. And of course, they've got Goldschmidt and Arenado, who are as good of a twosome in a lineup in baseball.
I don't know if I'd call them that much of a surprise considering the talent that's on their lineup, but if you really look at the Cardinals compared to, say, the Dodgers and the Braves, then yeah, I would probably agree that they are being slept on. And what's another thing I've often said on Hitting for the Cycle: never be careful when counting out the Cardinals in the postseason. In fact, last year I was flirting with the idea of having them beat the Dodgers in that 1-game playoff game. And mind you, this was a really good Dodger team that would have won the division any other year, but the Giants were just playing over their heads, so they had to play that wild card game.
Yeah. We'll see. And by the way, for all the talk about a Mets collapse, the Milwaukee Brewers collapsed more than the Mets did.
Big time.
I mean, the Brewers had a huge lead, and not only have they fallen apart, but they are missing the playoffs entirely. So if you want to talk about,
not to mention, they had a pretty bad August and September.
A terrible August, September. Ever since the Josh Hader trade, they've completely fallen apart. So I can't hear that this has been a Mets collapse when they're still playing from pretty much All-Star break on, still playing 20 games above 500, but the Braves were playing 30 above 500. You know what?
Can I give you a hot take regarding the Milwaukee Brewers?
Yeah, sure.
I think the problem wasn't really, I don't know that the problem with the Brewers was so much the Josh Hader trade. I mean, they had a deep bullpen. I can understand that, and it looked like a lot of the time. My problem was the return wasn't the best, but I think the real issue was that's a team that really probably should have beefed up their lineup, but other than that trade, they really didn't do anything at the deadline, and it cost them.
Yeah, and I think two of the players they got back in return, they DFA'd. I know Nelson Lament they DFA'd, and then I think there was somebody else that either was hurt or they cut too. So it's like they almost gave him away from nothing. And I know Hader struggled in the beginning there with San Diego, but we'll probably, unless the Mets rally. And the other thing too is the weather. We don't know too. I mean, they got postponed Monday night. I know the weather up there is awful right now. They're dealing with the remnants of Ian up there as well in New York. So who knows? Of course, I saw a post real quick before we move on. I saw a post saying that, here the Marlins are going to sweep the Braves and the Mets are going to lose the third game of a triple header. And that's how they're not going to win the NL East. Yeah, triple header. Yeah, I don't know about that, but we'll find out what happens here. I'm excited for the postseason because I think it's more wide open than we really thought it would be. And I look for the Braves to make a big move, a big push here. I think the Cardinals can't be ruled out. And I think still the Mets, I still think because of Showalter too, and if they get Sterling Marte back, I think that's a tremendous boost. I still would not count the Mets out for as much as their struggles here. And it's not like the Mets didn't hit or anything. I mean, they had hits. The thing was the Braves really won the series also not because of home runs. And the Mets don't have that kind of power. They were having singles and doubles while the Braves were hitting the ball out of the ballpark with Swanson and Olsen there in Atlanta over the weekend. But we'll find out what happens here with the Mets as they will, unless they can get very, very fortunate here, are going to probably end up in a wild card situation. And the wild card rounds start on October the 7th. Now, the other team in New York, the Yankees, another team that's been talked about, especially with one Aaron Judge, who did tie Roger Maris in the American League home run record at 61. But he's actually been, as he's also going for the Triple Crown as well, but he has kind of slumped off here these last couple of games. But it's, when you look at the Yanks here, Hank, I mean, there's really not much to talk about the team coming down the stretch here. You start looking at them going into the postseason here. Now, of course, you want Judge to get to 62, but I think he needs a day off here. Mm-hmm. He needed a day off somewhere along the lines, and maybe it's in this doubleheader that they're playing against the Rangers right now. But I think also, so talking about Judge here for a second, it's been awesome to see. But I think at the same time, if this was any other thing that was going on, if he wasn't going after the home run title, I think you'd see him get rested a little bit more than he has, because I think he's been playing an awful lot lately. And what you really just want to see here with the Yanks is you really just want to see them be healthy and at full potential going into the playoffs. And that's starting to be a little bit of an issue on the bullpen side. But first with Judge, Hank, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know if it's really him pressing. I think part of it has to do with the fact that pitchers are figuring out how to pitch to him, which I think it might be a bit of a concern going into the postseason. I mean, make no mistake, I do think the Yankees probably should have given him a day off during one of those games. But, what I also think it says is more people in this lineup are going to have to produce come October when the games really, well, granted, we're already in October. You know what I mean?
Yes.
When the games really matter the most,
I agree. And, they got to be healthy first. That would be a good thing. I don't know about what it looks like here with Benintendi. I know LeMahieu just came back, but I also would, getting into the playoffs here, I would not be batting Judge leadoff in the postseason. I think still his best potential is in the second spot, and I still would put DJ LeMahieu back in the leadoff spot. Or if Andrew Benintendi comes back, then I maybe would put Benintendi up there. Judge, to me, is not a leadoff hitter. I get why they're doing it now in the regular season, and I know with all the injuries that they've had to, but to me, he's a number two hitter. I think LeMahieu is more of a leadoff guy who gets on base. He's a contact kind of guy. But yeah, they also are going to need, they're going to need production up and down this lineup to be successful. And also the pitching staff is going to need to. The rotation's kind of interesting because I know one of the talking points here these last few days have been, who would you have as your game one starter next year? Next week, would you go with Cole, who's your ace, or would you go with Nestor Cortez, who's had an unbelievable year, who's had an unbelievable Cy Young potential kind of year? That probably is the question you would ask about the rotation going into next week.
I think it's a tough call. I think regardless, Garrett Cole is going to end up getting that number one start because of experience. Although personally, if it were up to me, I would probably go with Nestor just because, based on his last starts, he has been the hot hand, and he's going games where he's been pitching 6-7 innings and only giving up one hit. This guy is absolutely filthy, and he's not a guy that necessarily has dominating stuff, but he's somebody that relies on smarts, and he's one of the better big game pitchers the Yankees have in that starting rotation. So I probably would start him for game one. But with that having been said, I'm not saying that Garrett Cole is necessarily the wrong idea. However, I think you also have to pitch Severino in game 3, because if it gets dicey and the series is tied, Severino is a guy who he's had good stuff. The potential's definitely there, but I think this is going to be the real year where you see, will the real Severino show up in the playoffs. So I think game 3 is really going to be the moment of truth for the Yankees in these playoffs, especially because we don't know if they're going to go with a 4-man rotation. We don't know if Jameson Taillon's going to pitch game 4,
Yeah, I think it's very difficult in this day and age to not go with a 4-man rotation. I know the Yankees only went with 3 starters back in 2009. It was an entirely different generation of baseball back then, an entirely different group of pitchers back then. I mean, I know Cortez is finally starting to pitch deep into games, which is, I think, very, very important. But I think they are going to go with a 4-man staff in the divisional round. But the other key, too, to the Yankees is this bullpen. And this is really a big deal because now the news that came out on Tuesday about Rob Marinaccio being out with the stress reaction in his shin. Now, and Boone was talking that he's going to be out till probably the ALCS. So now this bullpen, which, you have a Chapman who's you're scared to death about. All of a sudden now guys like, Wandy Peralta, Lucas Luque, Jonathan Loizaga, who to me should have been the Yankee closer to start the year. Holmes has struggled a lot here in the second half since that injury. Bullpen shaky. I mean, that's really what it is. I almost now have more confidence in the starting staff than I do in the bullpen. And I think what you're going to need is length out of this rotation. But, pitchers have a short leash in the postseason.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the bullpen's really the area that scares me the most, especially because, the health of Clay Holmes and Wandy Peralta right now is kind of iffy. And we're hoping that they can get them back into the bullpen once the playoff starts. And Efros has done an okay job as closer lately, but then again, I don't know if he's going to be the one you're going to put in the 9th inning due to lack of experience. And then I think the guy that really is going to be important in the bullpen come the postseason might be Jonathan Loizaga, because he's the one that he had a really tough start at the beginning of the year, but then he got better as of late. So it'll be interesting to see what he does, and hopefully he can give you an inning or two if need be. And then I would also have to say that another guy who we really hope they can get back is Rob Marinaccio. Now, obviously, we know he's probably going to be missing the ALDS, but should the Yankees get past the winner, let's say it's either Seattle or Toronto, or actually, no, it wouldn't be Cleveland. Cleveland would play the Astros one way it would be. I'm sorry, I can't even think right now.
No, that's all right. Because
you get my point.
The teams are set, but there's still a couple of changes that could be made here in these last couple of days before the playoffs start. We're gonna have more of a clearer picture on that when we're on next week for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But they're gonna probably be mixing and matching here in the bullpen. See, to me, I think Jonathan Loizaga's got that kind of stuff, and now that he's healthy too. I mean, I know he had that shoulder problem last year and again this year, and he had, like you said, he had a tough start to the season, but he's been pitching better as of late. But the staff's going to be interesting, and I think the lineup. I tell you, the Yankee lineup here in the beginning of the season, it was unstoppable. Lately though, I mean, you do have a lot of question marks. I mean, they're going to have some they're going to have some young kids, probably like Peraza and Cabrera, who have both contributed. They both hit home runs in the first game of the doubleheader on Tuesday. So with Hicks being there, it's there's not, it's kind of a concern still. It's amazing because they started out so well, and we knew they weren't going to be able to keep the stretch. But lately, it's just been an entirely different animal.
I agree.
Yeah, and we'll find out. It's postseason's going to be it's with this extra wild card. It's going to be very, very fascinating. That's for his extra wild card round. And while we're on the subject here of teams in the postseason, I think one of the coolest story in baseball was the Seattle Mariners getting in, and the way they do it too. Kyle Raleigh comes up in a pitch hitting spot, walk off home run, and that breaks what the longest drought in baseball, the 21 years since they last made the playoffs, 2001, and the Mariners are back in it. A great story. Actually, when you think about it, there were two long droughts that ended now with this expanded postseason. The Mariners got in, and the Philadelphia Phillies broke an 11-year drought to get into the playoffs as they're in as well. So the expanded playoff does allow extra teams to get in, obviously, but for a Seattle team that we've been talking about all season as being one of those wild card teams, and Hank, I know you've said it too. You think the Mariners could be the surprise team in the American League?
Yes, I do, and I stand by that claim because the Mariners have really good pitching, and you look at that lineup; it's definitely been a lot better and really re-energized. However, that's not to say I don't have a concern with the Seattle Mariners, and that concern is that as great of a pitcher as Luis Castillo is, and as solid as the team as a whole is right now, the experience might be a thing that doesn't help them should they play the Houston Astros. And if I'm being honest with you, you really look at a lot of the really good teams that are in the playoff picture if the season were to have ended today. I think the Astros are the ones that probably have the easiest road to the World Series, in my personal opinion. But the Mariners, I think because they play in the same division as the Houston Astros, I do believe that they might have an outside shot at being able to upset them just because they're more familiar. And if you look at a lot of the games the Mariners lost to the Astros, a lot of them were before the trade deadline. So they've definitely been a different team. And yeah, if they steal a game in Houston, then that series gets interesting because the Safeco Field is going to be rocking. Well, I know it's probably changed its name, but I still think of it as Safeco. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So that's going to be huge if the Mariners can somehow steal away home field advantage. And, let's say they win game 3, then the Astros are under a lot of pressure, especially because, after 2017 and after all the cheating scandals that have happened, there are going to be those that really question the Astros and, whether their run at glory has been legit. But, that being said, I still think the Astros probably will find a way to win that series, but it's not going to be as easy as people think. But then again, the Astros have a rotation that's pretty deep too. So it's not like I'd worry about them in that situation.
And
T-Mobile Park, by the way, was the name. Sorry, I had a bit of a brain fart.
Hey, you know what? When we did our Football Friday picks last Friday, I almost said Heinz Field, and I still couldn't think of the actual new home of the Steelers. And I was saying to Nick that I'd say by week 17, I probably will know what it is. But when you think of safe, you always think of it Safeco Field, but this whole new age of sponsorship and stuff. So T-Mobile Park. By the way, before we get to our other baseball stories real quick, let me give you right now, the season ended today. These would be the wild card series that'd be going on. In the American League, you would have the Rays at the Guardians. The Mariners would go to Toronto to take on the Blue Jays. And in the National League, you would have Phillies, Cardinals, and Padres, Mets. So that would be what it would be like if the series were to start today. They are starting on October the 7th in what should be a very fascinating weekend of baseball because all 3 games are going to be at the higher seeds ballparks, which it could be very, very fascinating. Like I was saying, the Padres having to come over here to play the Mets could be something. The Mariners going up to Toronto. I'll tell you, I still, if I look at it right now, and again, this isn't really like the determining thing, but I still wouldn't put it past the Rays to get past the Guardians. Tampa Bay does more with less than any other team in baseball, and I still wouldn't put it past them. Now Tyler Glasnow is back, and his first start was very good. So it's almost like getting an ace at the at the last week. So I wouldn't put it past Tampa with Glasnow and McClanahan. I mean, Tampa Bay could be a very sneaky team in that wild card series.
I would agree, but I also think that the Guardians are still more of a threat than people really give them credit for, just for the sheer fact that, they have a lot of young players on that roster, and they've got a nice little core that, that have developed together and produced a division title. By the way, a lot of credit has to go to the Guardians front office rather, for the moves they made. I know people will shame the White Sox for being an underachievers, and rightfully so, but Cleveland, I think, did a better job than people realize. And not to mention, you got Jose Ramirez absolutely carrying them. I really think taking that Lester contract may have made him better, because he really seemed to love playing for Cleveland. It's not too often you really get a player taking a hometown discount like that for a smaller market team. So I think they should be I think they're intriguing as well. But regardless, I don't know if the winner of that series gets past the Yankees, and that's obviously not my bias speaking.
Nope, that's very, very fair. I definitely could see that as well. And real quick, in the National League, I think the Phillies can absolutely mash against the Cardinals. I don't know if they can get past them right now, but don't put it past the Phillies right now to maybe homer.
Philly did win the season series, I think. So it's not impossible, but that being said, throw the records out the window.
Yeah, it's 3-game series, and anything is certain is really possible there. And again, I still would not rule the Mets out right now. I know they've struggled here these last couple of weeks, but I still would not put it past the Mets either. When you look at it overall, they've still had a very, very successful season. But wild card round gets started on the 7th, and when we're here next week, we will have our ALDS and NLDS, which starts on October the 11th. October the 11th, Hank, is going to be a great day for all of us, because we're going to have the 4th series, and Rangers are back. I know we're going to talk a lot. We'll talk some hockey next week on the show, but it's going to be a great day, and then we'll be another week with football. Now, let me just get a couple of other baseball things out of the way here before we get to the football. You were talking about the White Sox, and to me, maybe the most disappointing team in baseball this year. And I know Tony La Russa was dealing with some health issues towards the end of the year, and he came out the other day and announced his retirement. Very, very tough year for the White Sox. But what do you make of this with La Russa?
I don't think he really should have been managing the White Sox to begin with, as we saw pretty much from what happened last year. And you look at a lot of the things that happened this year. I mean, I still can't believe he called intentional walks on 1-2 counts. That's pretty ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, I think he was one thing that was holding them back besides the injuries. But, as for who replaced him, we'll see. I think there are a lot of people that want Miguel Cairo, and Miguel Cairo seems to have done a decent job. I think wouldn't be surprised if he ends up landing that job, but maybe they decide to go elsewhere. But, I think that failure was kind of predictable in the sense of who the manager was, and it just goes to show you really can't trust a Jerry Reinsdorf hire.
No. I think that was part of it too. I think it was really more of a friend thing when you think about it with Reinsdorf and La Russa.
Here's what I think Reinsdorf was thinking. He's like, "Oh, hey Tony, how's it going? I know we fired you like 35 years ago. It was one of the biggest mistakes in my life. But would you like to help my young squad? Oh, sure, I'll take it."
Yeah, that sometimes the experienced manager is important for a team. The Mets, I think, are a perfect example of that.
But the problem is when you take a manager who hasn't done anything in 10 plus years and he's getting up there in years, then you maybe need to realize, can I really teach an old dog new tricks?
Or you try and manage a 90s, 2000 style of baseball in 2022.
No.
That's another thing too. It just doesn't work.
I mean, the White Sox are living proof that, you adapt or die. If you try to go back to the old ways that, have become archaic, then that you're going to fail. That would be like if I decided to replace my my iPhone with an old flip phone.
Oh, geez, yeah. No, that's a good one. Yeah, it's tough because I picked the White Sox to win the division, and they were not healthy all year. And look, injuries are going to happen. Every team goes through them. But yeah, the Louisa experiment just seemed like it didn't work from day one. And I'd like to see Miguel Cairo get a shot. You know what? It's like you said. He actually did pretty well with them when he was there. We'll see if they make him the full-time guy next year going forward. But yeah, so first and foremost, though, we also hope that Louisa is going to be okay.
Yes, no, absolutely. I don't want anyone to think that I was like shaming.
No, you weren't. That's of course, though, we want to put that out there.
No,
as
yeah,
well.
definitely want to be okay.
And we were talking about cool stories. With the Mariners, the way they clinched their first postseason spot in 21 years. Well, we all know the Albert Pujols farewell season has been amazing, and really from the moment that he came back with that he signed back with the Cardinals, when he was jogging through right field in spring training, which was such an amazing thing, and then he comes back to St. Louis, and just these last couple of weeks, when he was having his home run fest, and he was like at 696, and he's making that push towards 700. And then he gets the 700, and then he gets 699 and 700 in the same game in LA. Just unbelievable. And he comes back home, and he just continues to, rake. And in his final home game of the season, of the regular season, that is, he hits a home run. And then also just the way that, him, Molina, and Adam Wainwright all leave the mound at the same time. I mean, I don't like to root for the Cardinals, but this is a pretty cool story that's happening out there in St. Louis.
Hey, if they won the World Series, so long as it wasn't against the Yankees, I would not necessarily be upset with that.
I think a Yankee Cardinal World Series, that'd be pretty cool.
Hasn't happened since '64, and I'm sure there are plenty of other years where it should have happened since.
Yeah, wow, that'd be something. I mean, look, the one thing with the expanded playoffs, again, I'm not a fan of them, but it does make things a little bit more wide open than we think. Because
the a team you use as an example, the Phillies, they're a team that can mash their way to victories, but then it comes to the point where they're pitching. I mean, Aaron Nola's all right, Zach Wheeler's been great, but then afterwards it's kind of sus.
And defense is still a thing that scares you with Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure many Philly fans have bitter nightmares about a certain game in the 93 World Series. Not the Joe Carter game, but 15-14 with Mitch not being able to hold a 5-run lead.
Yes, yeah.
So, in other words, their bullpen.
But think about it, too. They fired Girardi, and we think the season's going in the dumps, and look what Rob Thompson's able to do. You almost can give him Manager of the Year, considering how the Phillies were able to turn things around here.
Yeah, I would definitely consider him. You could also argue Buck Showalter for the NL.
I think Buck should win it in the National League. Sometimes when I look at Managers of the Year, I always like to look at not the best team, but the team that's made a turnaround, which have been the Mets, and the way the team's been. I mean, to me, I think I would go with. See, it's interesting because even the Blue Jays could also be considered maybe an interim Manager of the Year there too after they fired Montoyo. That could be something too, but we'll get into the awards when the offseason happens in baseball. But I'll tell you what, postseason starts next week, Hank. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll be on next Tuesday, I should say, when the division series start up, and we'll break them all down and make predictions and see what goes on here. But we'll find out. But definitely a lot of baseball stuff here as we come down the stretch. But let's get to the football here, and we're going to go through week 4 entirely. But obviously, the big story in football really happened. The first game, well, it started really in week 3, but it really turned up another notch on that Thursday night game to start week 4 between the Dolphins and the Bengals, as Tua Tagovailoa, who we saw him take that nasty fall against the Bills in week 3 and then come back later in the game and appear to be all right. But, there's always the talk right away about the concussion, and then he's cleared to play cleared to play the game last Thursday and takes a nasty hit and is slow and then has to get carted off the field. Now, it looks like he's doing okay, but this also brings up the debate and the talk about the concussion and the protocol and all that stuff. And Hank, I know you're very passionate about this. I think we all are because we all want everybody to be healthy and stuff. And concussions are a big deal, especially in football. So I'm going to give you the floor here.
To say that I was angry and disappointed at the way everything was handled during that Thursday night game would be the absolute understatement of the year. And I'm sorry, but like, even though I've praised Mike McDaniel for the job that he's done, and don't get me wrong, I think he's a great coach. He's definitely partially responsible too, just for telling the media that, it was a back injury and being willing to let his quarterback in. But I really think that has more to do with the training staff clearing him to play when they shouldn't. Either way, if you were to accuse the Dolphins of medical malpractice, I can't say that accusation would be necessarily far off. I think the Dolphins made an absolutely terrible mistake to let him play. And look, if somehow, some way Tua were to retire, this led to an early retirement from Tua, I think we all would understand. Because for him to be playing there and then get destroyed, and now his brain's like pretty much turning into mashed potatoes at this point, like, that is absolutely horrific. And listen, I'm glad there was a new rule about how players had to be taken out of the game if they appear even a little bit disoriented. But see, here's the thing. It's not a rule that's making me ecstatic. I think if anything, that's a rule where you should be like, oh, damn, why did it have to take a disaster like this for this to come into play?
I agree with that. I think it's another case of the NFL being reactive and not proactive. And they've done this on numerous occasions, whether it's been rules, injuries. I mean, I always think one of the prime examples of that was the pass interference replay, and that lasted a season. But yeah, when concussions and brain injuries have been one of your biggest problems these last few years, you need to take every step that you can. Now, you need to take every step that you can to, make sure this doesn't happen. Now, let's talk about this for a second, because I don't think I can really blame Mike McDaniel, because it's really the doctors and the training staff that are, relaying it. And if they're telling you that he's okay and he can go back, unless there's evidence that they did say that and McDaniel's ignored that, then it'd be another story. But I think that stuff would have came out already. We're now almost 2 weeks removed from when the initial hit took place, and we're a week out now from when this hit happened. Now, I know also that Tua did meet or was meeting with the NFLPA investigation. He's expected to be interviewed as part of this, so maybe we'll find out something there. But I think it's trying to put this all together. I think it's very difficult for McDaniel to be held responsible, because unless he goes in there himself, and he can't do that because he's coaching the game, I don't know how he can actually be held responsible in all this.
Which, again, I think that's fair. But again, I also don't know if there was something that happened with him around the scenes that, maybe he could have been aware of something. But either way, the Dolphins definitely committed malpractice.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was a short week to go from Sunday to Thursday like they did, and yeah, I mean, it was a crazy hit there that he took place. It's tough to really also talk. I think there's a lot more though that might come out that we may know about, but I don't know. It's tough now. Tua's already been ruled out for the game on Sunday against the Jets, so looks like Teddy Bridgewater is gonna get the start there on Sunday. But as far as Tua here, yeah, I don't know. There's still a lot of things that may come out between now and next week that we may not know about right now.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I mean, this is one of the things I'm sure the NFL does not want to keep talking about. I mean, there's a few things we've spoken about things like this before, and this is definitely one of them. We definitely don't want to keep talking about, concussions and stuff because, Hank, like you said, if this ended up lingering to other problems or future problems, I mean, this definitely could be an altering event for sure. But you look at it though, the Bengals got a win there too, but really that wasn't even the Bengal win. Wasn't really the big story when you look at what happened here with Tua. But we'll find out. I think there's more stuff. Tua, like I said, Tua was interviewed by investigators as they continue to look into what is going on here, and we'll find out if more information develops here in the coming days. But as far as Week 4 in general goes, Hank, you look at these games, and really started in London on Sunday morning, where the Vikings got past the Saints. It took, though, a 61-yard missed field goal, a double doink there in London as they got past the Saints 28-25. That was with Andy Dalton starting for the Saints, so a big win there for the Vikings to go back to 2-2. The Falcons got past the Browns in that one, and then the Bills Ravens. How about this one? The Ravens jump out to a big lead early, 20-3. The Bills come back, and the big story was really the play late was also the play calling of John Harbaugh there in Baltimore. A chance to kick a field goal late, and he doesn't do it. And the Ravens, there was a crazy stat that I think the Ravens had lost are like 103. You want to talk about a fun fact. They were 103 in their last games when having a 17-point lead, I think, at home, and they're 1-2 in those games this year, or in general. Let me go double check that stat. But in games that they had a 17-point lead, they were 103, and this year they obviously we know what happened there. But big win for the Bills with a team that's dealing with injuries in their defense.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought the Bills had a really good bounce back win, especially after their big loss in Miami. And look, whether they'll recover from those injuries on the defensive side, who knows how long that'll take. But I am still very much high on the Buffalo Bills train.
So the Ravens were 103 in games with a 17-point lead from 1996 to 2021. And this year, in games with a 17-point lead, they're 1-2.
Wow.
And that's with Lamar Jackson playing like an MVP through the first 4 weeks of the year.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah.
You also have to wonder if John Harbaugh could eventually be given the hot seat.
It could be at the end of the year. I mean, I think
if things continue, are you going to start to hear people calling for his head?
Certainly. I mean, a lot of people.
There's another coach I really think should be getting more calls for his head, but I think
we're going to get to him, and I think I know who it is, and we're going to get to them in just a minute here. There's a few of them actually when you look at it now. Seahawks, Commanders, Cowboys, really not a big deal. I mean, we knew that was going to be an ugly one. Cowboys got through there easily. Seahawks, Lions. How about this? How about the start to the season for one Geno Smith, completing 77% of his passes? Truly incredible. I never would have thought in my wildest dreams that the Seahawks would put up 48 points. Now, when we did our picks, this was actually a game that I actually wasn't really even comfortable picking because the Lions were dealing with a wrath of injuries. Ahmad St. Brown was out. Swift, the running back, was out. They were having issues with their offensive line. But, give the Seahawks credit. Give, Pete Carroll, Geno Smith. Geno Smith's through the first 4 games, he's actually been playing really, really well. And I'll tell you what, the Lions, I know they haven't been able to close games out. They're a fun team to watch. I actually was into that game a lot. And, they were down by 2 scores, but they would close the gap, and they couldn't get over the top there. But I'll tell you what, this Lions team, they're fun to watch. I know they've been. It seems like they've been rebuilding since 1957. But I'll tell you what, you know what. I mean, Jared Goff's done well. I mean, look at the number of points they put up. I mean, they're getting there. I'll just put it that
Yeah.
way. They're getting there, but they're still going to be. They still need some help there to get over the top. But you know what? Lions are a fun team, and Seahawks been actually one of the surprises. You look at these first couple of weeks. I know we're gonna go through all the games here, but the Falcons, the Seahawks, and the Texans, who probably you would think are three of the worst teams in the league this year, they've actually been competitive so far through these first 4 weeks.
You also got to give Geno Smith credit where credit is due. He's actually had some of the better numbers so far. Imagine thinking that at the beginning of the season.
I mean, Hank, before the Broncos played their Week 4 game, the Seahawks put up 48 points against the Lions last Sunday, and the Broncos put up 44 all season before their game against the Raiders. So, I mean, I don't know how long it could last. I think the Seahawks, though, could be one of those teams that could be a playoff spoiler this year. I know our Giants got to go play them in a couple of weeks up in Seattle. It's always a tough place to play. So that could be one of those spots. You know what? You never know. They've done it already to the Broncos, and they'll be a team that could be a spoiler team for sure. And yeah, you've got to be fair to Geno Smith, because I know a lot of us were probably laughing our butts off when we heard that Geno was going to be the starter and when he even signed there. But he's played really well, and we'll see if it continues up there in Seattle. Chargers got past the Texans. The Chargers have been dealing with some injuries as well. Texans had been in every game. Wasn't really bad. I actually took the Texans +5. Didn't work out last week, but it was a bounce back win for the Chargers there. Titans Colts. Maybe this is what you were talking about. I don't know what to make of Indy. You know what? I mean,
why would you kick a field goal down by 7 with around 2 minutes remaining? Like, somebody explain the logic there. I mean, I get you probably have the onside kick, but do you realize the chances of recovering the onside kick might have been slimmer than had you gone for it on 4th and 20 like you should have? I mean, again, granted, 4th and 20 is 4th and 20, but still, you never know. Somebody could take a really dumb penalty. It allows the Colts right back. And let's see. Here's a tough choice. Yeah. You're gonna take a field goal that still makes it a 1-score game to still a 1-score game where needing a touchdown, or you're going to go for the touchdown that actually puts you in the position to win. Tough call.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I think you've been saying this.
And it's a damn shame, because I thought Frank Reich has been doing a decent job with the Colts for the most part, but that decision was just very head-scratching. And I'm afraid that he's going to end up getting the axe, even though I don't think what's happening to the Colts is entirely his fault. I mean, I don't think Chris Ballard's really done a great job, at least draft pick wise, over the past few years, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah. In an AFC South, which is kind of a favorable division when you look at it, I mean, if there's a time to make a move, this would be it. And I know they play on Thursday night, and if they lay another dud against the Broncos Thursday, that might be it. Now, I know they're dealing with some injury woes there. I know every team is, but they're dealing definitely with Jonathan Taylor and stuff. But you know what? Titans are not a good team, and they made the Titans look good. And they're not good either. That's why I think when you look at it, the Jaguars might actually have a more favorable path to winning the AFC South.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, for sure.
And we're going to get to that Jaguar-Eagle game in just a second. But let's talk about as I go through the order here, let's talk about our Giants getting past the Bears 20-12. I know you were at that game on Sunday. You know what? Here's what I would say 4 weeks in. I mean, 3-1. If you would have told me 3-1, considering the talent level that we've had and who we've had out there and the way they've been playing, I mean, it's been.
I would have said sign me up.
Oh yeah, and I actually love the fact the way the Giants have played here these first 4 weeks. I know they laid a little bit of a dud there against the Cowboys, but you know what? They were in the game for most of it. They just didn't have the personnel to line up with that defense of Dallas, and Cooper Rush made some plays, but I mean, the Giants have been in every game so far, and you know what? You got to credit that defense. You got to credit the offensive line. I think Saquon Barkley being healthy, he looks like the explosive guy that we had in our rookie year, and I think also the offensive line's got to get credit for that. I think Daniel Jones has played well enough. Now, of course, he gets hurt, but he's played well enough to, give the Giants chances here. He's had some bad moments, but he's also had a lot of very great moments. And again, the talk's been, they're frauds. They're lucky to be 3-1. I think that is a bunch of nonsense. If you watch
3-1 is 3-1.
Yes, this is not.
Remember what an old Giants coach once said: "You are what your record says you are."
Well, let's also be fair too. This is not college football where if you're 3-1, it depends on how you got to be 3-1. It's not college basketball where you have a resume they look at if you want to get into the NCAA tournament. And you know what? Like I said 2 weeks to you, Hank, 2 weeks ago to you, Giants can have 10 of these wins, and that'd be great. They'll get in. I don't think they're going to get that. I think they're going to have a reality check here at some point. It may even start next week because one of the other things you take out of this game are the injuries. Daniel Jones' ankle sprain. Tyrod Taylor goes in there, and he gets concussion, which is very, very unfortunate. Poor Tyrod Taylor just cannot catch a break, it seems like sometimes. It's unbelievable. But he gets hurt. I know Julian Love was hurt. But then again, this team, they continue to find ways. And I know Justin Fields had one good pass, but the Bears did nothing. And that I think it speaks to them, but it also speaks to, I think, how great the Giants played too.
Yeah, I would definitely have to agree. This was by far one of the guttier Giants wins I've seen in a long time. I mean, forget the fact that you were without Daniel Jones and Tyrod Taylor for a good amount of time and having to have Saquon run the Wildcat multiple times. But
I love, by the way.
Remember, we're still waiting for Kayvon Thibodeau and Azeez Ojulari to fully be 100%. If those guys become a big part of that defense, Johnny, the Giants might be able to steal more wins than people think if those guys become a real focal point on the defense, because they're insane. I mean, granted, the secondary obviously is one of the weaker points, and after some of the names I mentioned, and also I also forgot to mention you didn't have Leonard Williams either. That was another key injury there. But if you get those guys, you get Leonard Williams back, this could be a really lethal defense that could cause a lot of headaches for whoever has to play them during the course of the season. Now, again, am I saying the Giants are winning the Super Bowl? No, I'm not even saying they're going to win the division. But again, you have to like what you're seeing. Wink Martindale has done a great job with that defense. And really, it's the coaching as a whole. This type of game doesn't happen in years past.
That's right. And I'll give you some numbers.
And I don't care that this was against the Bears. We've seen the Giants lose to the Bears. We saw the Giants lose to the Bears 29-3 with friggin' Mike Glennon starting.
That's right.
Don't give me that argument.
I'm not. You know what? And talking about their defense, so the Giants are second in opposing third down percentage. They're second in opposing red zone touchdown percentage. They're tied for second in opposing inside 30 touchdown percentage. They're sixth in opponent in 3 and outs. They're tied for 9th in points allowed. They rank first in rushing, and then offensively, then you also look at it here. Rushing yards a game, they're first in points outside the red zone, 10-yard runs, takeaway fumbles. I mean, guys, you know what? With a team that, let's be honest, they're not the most talented team in football. I wouldn't say that at all, but they're getting the job done. And I even would say that with Daniel Jones when you look at it. You know what? He's working his butt off. I mean, he's making just enough plays. I don't know if he's the long-term option, but I'll say this. He's helping you win games now, and he deserves credit for doing that.
Absolutely.
So,
and again, I'm not even saying that Daniel Jones is going to be the long-term quarterback of the future either.
Hank, we'll be talking about this, I think, through the end of the season. This will be something that's going to continue to be brought up now. The one thing, though, is injuries. That would be something that you do get a little alarmed about. Now, this is an ankle sprain that they're talking about. It's not it's not, as of right now, it's not sounding too good. And of course, we know Tyrod Taylor is in concussion protocol. So you're looking at possibly Davis Webb, or dare I say there are 2 names that I heard them bring up that they were trying out on Tuesday. I know this might, you might cringe a little bit when you hear this, but Jake Fromm, Jake from State Farm again, and possibly Matt Barkley. But
Not in love with that name either, but still.
But I tell you what, and I know we'll make our football picks on Friday, but you know what? That Giants defense can definitely keep them in games, and I think they could keep them in this London game against the Packers on Sunday morning. I absolutely do. You know what? The Packers have not shown the ability to score yet. I know they put up 27 points against the Patriots, but that was in overtime. I definitely think the Giants could keep it close. Now, of course, I'd love to have a healthy Daniel Jones in this spot, but I think the Giants defense can definitely keep this game close on Sunday, and we'll find out. We'll make our full picks on Sunday. But I'll tell you that London game next week going to be you know what? Now it becomes a huge game, and maybe the Giants get lucky that the game's outside of Lambeau Field. I think that also helps a little bit too. You play a neutral site there, but through 4 weeks, I think you have to be very, very excited with the Giants, the way things have been going here, all things told.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's what's happening there. Eagles got past the Jaguars. The Jaguars got out to a 14-0 lead, but the Eagles are for real, folks. That's really what it comes down to.
So are the Jaguars, in my opinion.
And you know what? The Giants got to play the Jags in a couple of weeks. The Giants have a stretch of a couple of weeks coming up here where they've got the Packers, the Ravens, and the Jaguars. And I think that'll be a good test for them. They got a good 4-game stretch here before they have their bye week. And I think, you know what? You sign up for 2-2 if you're the Giants right there. Get into your bye week at 5-3. That's what I think you have to go for. But the Eagles get past the Jaguars. So far that NFC least, not really least this year. 4-0.
Nope.
4-0 Eagles, 3-1 Giants, 3-1 Cowboys. You know what we can call them? NFC Beast this year. It's gone from the least to the beast. That's what I would say there. Jets get past the Steelers. That was one of my upset specials last week, as Zach Wilson made his season debut for the Jets, and I think brought them some life. And of course, the big deal out of Pittsburgh's side of things is that Mitch Trubisky did get benched for Kenny Pickett.
I think I had that as my upset special too, and probably for the same reason as you.
Negative.
No?
No. I had you at Steelers.
Let
me just double check here. Yeah, you had the Steelers. They said they just would barely cover.
Okay, then to be fair, it's probably because I thought the Jets were going to be the Jets, but still.
Yeah,
I'm not entirely surprised.
No, but I'll say this though. I think Zach Wilson Zach Wilson actually had a favorable debut situation here, because to me the Steelers' run defense is not that good, and I think this was a great chance for Breece Hall to get his running game going, and I think that's what happened. And Wilson made some good plays, and you know what? Jets team is also a fun team to watch now too, and they go to play the Dolphins on Sunday now without Tua. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility the Jets go to 3-2 after next Sunday. But Jets have, you know what? The Jets have been drafted well. They're starting to put some pieces together. I think you're concerned about the Jets also is the coaching staff. But you know what? You're 2-2 through 4 games, and now Wilson's back, and he's played, and he had a good debut. I think things get interesting there in Florham Park. And I'll tell you this right now, Jets-Patriots, I'll tell you right now, the Jets could definitely beat the Patriots. That's why my bold prediction for the year was that the Patriots were a last-place team in the AFC East.
And again, in the grand scheme of things, it's not that bold.
Yeah, we're going to get to them in just a second here, but Pat's got a lot of problems, folks. Jets actually have some talent. And you know what? If Zach Wilson plays well, they're going to win quite a few games. By the way, I can hear Nick Morgeson, our buddy, not in the background, probably throwing something, because I keep saying the Jets are going to win games. And if you remember over him at Empty the Bench, he was saying he wanted the Jets to go 0-17. Well, I'm going to say it now, and I'm going to say it to him tomorrow on Empty the Bench. Jets are not going 0-17. In fact, I think they actually can even win Sunday, because I think they're actually improving a little bit. But a good win there for the Jets, and now the Steelers, who will turn to Kenny Pickett going forward here, also missing T.J. Watt in a big, big way. But that was a nice gritty win by the New York Football Jets on Sunday. And then in the late window, Cardinals get past the Panthers. I'll tell you, Panthers are unwatchable. that's something I said in the previous show. I thought the Panthers could win 8 games this year. Boy, I have looked totally off on that so far. As Baker Mayfield looks like looks completely lost out there. McCaffrey has been banged up in practice the last 2 weeks, and Carolina, who's got some players, just hasn't been able to get things going. And Kyler Murray continues to do it all for the Cardinals as they continue to try and tread water here until DeAndre Hopkins can return from
I would say that Matt Rule may be on the hot seat, but I think the only reason that's not the case is because of that contract and all the severance pay.
Yeah, it's not like, we've seen that in college, and we actually just saw that again with Paul Christ over there with Wisconsin, as somebody who with the severance pay and stuff. But yeah, I mean, this is, as I said, this is a huge year there for Carolina for Matt Rule, and it's not been off to a good start. And that could be another guy that's on the block here either during the season or at the end of the season, as Arizona gets past the Cardinals. And then started the late window, Patriots and Packers. This was such a big line, and I almost was going to take the Patriots +9 because to me the Packers just still don't have the ability to blow teams out yet. But it was Brian Hoyer starting for the Patriots, and then he goes out with concussion, so that the backup quarterback's getting concussed, and that brings in Bailey Zappi, and Zap actually plays all right. 10 of 16, 99 yards. The Patriots are in it throughout. Game goes to overtime. It comes down to a last-second field goal by Mason Crosby, and the Packers win. But it's not like the Packers have looked, convincing here these first 4 weeks, Hank. You know what? They struggled they looked awful against Minnesota. I know they bounced back in week 2, but then they barely got past the Bucks and struggled with the Patriots.
Yeah, no, I think the Packers definitely have more signs of being, like, say, vulnerable than in years past, and doesn't help that they've lost a lot of key pieces since last season. So I think you very well could be seeing a decline inevitable for them soon, especially once Aaron Rodgers leaves.
Yeah, I think that they're thin at the receiving core and in multiple positions. Them and the Vikings, to me, are going down to week 18. That's what I think it is there. They still have enough to win that division, but the gap's definitely closed.
It's not a landslide.
Yeah, so they get past the Packers barely get past the Patriots. Broncos get by the Raiders.
Other way around.
I'm sorry, the other way around. I'm sorry. That's what I wanted. I wanted the Broncos to get past the Raiders. It did not happen as the Raiders win. And now the Broncos, a lot of injuries for the Broncos in this game. The running backs got hurt. So, in a matchup of probably the bottom 2 teams there in the AFC West, the Broncos win. Chiefs get past the Bucks as Tampa now loses 2 in a row. Chiefs continuing to fire on all cylinders. What Patrick Mahomes was able to do, I mean, some of those touchdown passes on Sunday night, just absolutely incredible. And a lot of people, were down on the Chiefs, and I was down on their defense, and I know they gave up 31 points on Sunday, but their defense actually hasn't been too bad so far. And Pat Mahomes continues to play like Pat Mahomes there in Kansas City.
Oh yeah. Chiefs are still very much for real. No doubt about that. And by the way, I think you hate to be the Falcons next week. You want to know why? Because that means you're trying to beat Tom Brady for a 3rd straight time.
Yeah, it's not a favorable matchup for Atlanta. I know they've been kind of surprising this year, but also Cordell Patterson, their star running back, who's actually been in the top 3 in the running backs this year, he's going to be out. He got put on the injured reserve list this week. Definitely not favorable. I mean, look, I thought the Falcons were going to be dreadful this year. I thought they were actually the worst team in the NFL, but they've been impressive through the first 4 weeks. That's why I said, to me, I mean, the only team that I thought was going to be a dud this year that's been a dud has been the Bears. But the Texans have been competitive. The Falcons have been. So, I mean, they've at least been in, and Seattle. And Seattle's going to be one of those spoiler teams here as we get later on in the year. And then the Monday night game, 49ers get past the Rams easily. To me, the Rams, again, Rams and the Bengals, I think, dealing with a Super Bowl hangover here, and it might take them some time to get things going, but it might be too late. And you wonder now, are the 49ers this good because of Jimmy G or in spite of Jimmy G? That defense, though, I mean, I will say, though, the defense has been absolutely dominant through the first 4 weeks.
Give me a lot of good fantasy points. I'll take it.
that's when you will take that. Yes, absolutely. All right, so a couple of things here as we head to week 5 next week. We'll make our first official pick of week 5 here, but couple of storylines that I want to discuss real quick. We talked about it just a moment ago. Kenny Pickett going to be starting for the Steelers on Sunday. That's officially been announced. And then also Dak Prescott still not well enough to play, according to Jerry Jones in his regular weekly spot there at 105.3 The Fan in Dallas. So they're going to go with Cooper Rush again there in week 5 against the Rams. And I'll say this, that defense is stifling. That'll be a very, very good matchup, and we'll make that pick on Sunday. But let's make our first official week 5 pick right here, Hank. All right, so we get things. Week 5 gets going on Thursday night between the Indianapolis Colts and the Denver Broncos with Al Michaels and Kirk Herbstreit. And boy, this is going to be a game that I don't really know if you want to sit around and watch for 3 hours, but we will do it, and we'll make a pick here as Indy travels to that mile-high altitude against the Denver Broncos. And Hank, in this game, the Denver Broncos are laying 3.5.
That 3.5 point spread scares me. That being said, I'm still going to take the Broncos because the more I watch the Colts, the less and less impressed I am. And again, I still can't get over that stupid decision to kick a field goal. And it wasn't even a chip shot field goal. It was a 51-yarder too. But yeah, no, sorry. That's a rant for a game that already happened.
That's okay.
And look, even though the Broncos, I'm not really impressed with either. I think they find a way to win. It's a game in the mile high. Give me Denver.
There are a lot of problems with the Colts, but Jonathan Taylor being hurt also hurts them because now you're going to force Matt Ryan.
And that's a move that doesn't help my fantasy team.
You had Taylor?
Yep.
Yeah, see, I'm a big Jonathan Taylor guy. I actually thought he was going to have a better year this year than Derrick Henry, and he has not had a good start this year for sure. And now he's dealing with what they're saying, a high ankle sprain, and we all know about running backs with high ankle sprains. I mean, we know that here with Saquon Barkley. We know that down in Carolina with Christian McCaffrey. I mean, it's a very, very tricky thing. Those are usually multiple week injuries, and even if you are playing, how effective are you? So what does that mean? That means that Matt Ryan's going to have to is probably going to be throwing the ball a lot, and against that Denver pass defense, that's not a good matchup. I mean, the fact that Empire Field at Mile High, they got a built-in edge with that thin air, and the temperature is expected to be in the 40s. So a Colts team has to travel there to the Mile High Air and play outdoors when they're usually playing in a dome stadium. I know the Broncos have been having problems too this year, but I think this is a chance for them to get right and get going. I like them by at least a touchdown. I'm going to take Denver to win and cover to start week number 5. And hopefully for me personally, this could be the start of another big week for me in terms of my picks. But Hank, that just about puts a wrap on the show. So next week, it's going to get to be a lot of fun. It's always fun, but we got football. We got a Giants team that's relevant. We got a Jets team that's relevant. We got football that's, of course, relevant. College keeps going. And then next week, we've got divisional series baseball. And you know what else we've got next week?
What?
New York Rangers hockey. That's right. Rangers and Lightning next Tuesday. And then the week after that, we start getting basketball back. Folks, like we've been saying, 27 shows in, and we are just getting started. And that's definitely the case this week. So just our schedule for this week, as always, Thursday we will have, and yes, since my voice is back, we will have our Monty moment back this week. I had to do it in a tweet thread form this past week, but that'll be back. We've got a lot of college football topics to talk about. So we'll do that on the Monty moment Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Hank and I are back on Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern for our Football Friday picks against the spread. And I will be back with you also tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern, joining Nick Morgeson. Nick Federa and Montalbano for Empty the Bench. So definitely a lot to go on this week. So Hank, like we said, we're just getting started. It's going to be a great week of sports, and you have a great week, my friend. All right?
You do the same.
Absolutely, folks. So for Hank and Dictor, I'm Johnny Montalbano. We'll catch you later on this week. And then, of course, for episode 28 of Game On next week.